Hello everyone, friends. This is Crypto Kocherov with you. I'm launching a new format where I'll be reviewing various news, situations, tokens, activities, and more on a daily basis. And I hope this will be useful for those of you who are currently in the market to keep your finger on the pulse, to discuss different thoughts, ideas, and much more together with you. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, be sure to subscribe and like this video. Subscribe to my Telegram channel as well if you haven't already. You'll also find a lot of useful things for yourself there. And most of the time information comes out much faster on Telegram than it does here in a video, even though these videos will also be daily. So make sure to subscribe everywhere to always stay connected. All right, let's get started with the chart right away. There's a lot of new stuff for us. Things that have happened recently. Specifically, let's start with the Bitcoin chart. And we can see that we've been in a prolonged range, which we've been in since May for more than 60 days. A sideways movement, yes, where we were consolidating. We had a lot of bullish factors, namely the front running of the rate cut and, of course, the easing of the Fed's monetary policy. Obviously, all of this is interconnected. Then we had quite a lot of shorts, and there were many tests here. Yes, retests and shakeouts, by the way, V-shaped ones that recover very quickly. Here we have the 4-hour chart, and we successfully broke through all of this. As usual, inside this sideways range, there were a lot of different theories, opinions, and thoughts that we were finishing the cycle, that distribution was already happening, that a bear market was coming. But these people most likely didn't take into account that the market would be front-running the rate cut ahead. Accordingly, against this backdrop, the S&P is doing quite well, setting high after high. Here you go. We've just set a new all-time high. And just recently, I stretched out the chart from that correction that happened when Trump introduced the tariffs. So as you can see, we've already grown significantly, and the S&P is showing these kinds of strong moves. So we're still in this massive bullish trend, and this trend is clearly not over yet, because first of all, the market is still moving in line with the money supply, and the money supply keeps growing. And if you look at the global targets for Bitcoin, it would be quite realistic to expect it to reach somewhere around 140, 150, or even 170,000. So somewhere around 150 or 170,000. I believe that could be the end of this cycle, or maybe even higher. But these are the targets I tend to stick to. We got a correction. I specifically waited for a correction so I could record this video. Because corrections like this during such a strong trend, basically we had a parabolic candle. By the way, I also wrote about it in my Telegram channel. Not because I'm smart, but because there were a lot of shorts. And when there are a lot of shorts, that's a good thing. That's extra fuel, because any short liquidation is a forced market buy. I'm actually surprised that many people didn't know this. So liquidating a short means price goes up. And when there are a lot of short liquidations, we get a strong impulsive candle. The impulse is over. Great. Now, finally, we can expect some sideways trading. Of course, today we immediately got all sorts of news, like some kind of sales. The whales got active not just to shake people out here, but take advantage of these corrections if you wanted to enter the market, if you wanted to pick something up, and we'll talk about that now as well. So we're seeing a certain range forming here. I hope that it will actually form now. That would be good. But for now, at the moment, if we look locally, it is forming. So we clearly have a movement within which we can now operate. I don't think we'll be trading in this range for a long time. Yes, we need to establish at least some kind of time frame here, so we can see what's actually happening, what kind of sideways movement this is, and use it as a reference point. So in reality, this isn't exactly a necessary story, so to speak. In other words, it's not really relevant for me to tell you that we're going to stay here. We all want growth. We all want our altcoins to go up. That's why Bitcoin showed an impulse. Great. Now we need some consolidation, and then we'll move out from there. Or maybe they'll give us another fake out here, collect stop losses around here, maybe at 115, 114, or we'll touch the previous high, consolidate in a V shape, and then move on. There's no reason right now to stop or to start selling off here, and the cycle isn't over yet. I repeat, this is a front run of the rate cut. It's ongoing, it continues, and will most likely keep going until mid-autumn. Now let's look at Ethereum. Ethereum looks stronger right now, and that's definitely encouraging. Even the correction on Bitcoin is minus 2.16%, while Ethereum is only minus 1.06%. That's awesome. Ethereum also spent a long time in a sideways range. It looked pretty weak compared to Bitcoin. We all know this already. It hasn't shown any new highs yet, but in this kind of range, yeah, they also shook everyone out in a V shape and let people exit. Remember how most people were expecting Ethereum to drop to $1,000 or even $800? In the end, none of that happened. Those people were either safely shaken out of the market or they had to buy back in at a higher price. Great. That was quite a shakeout. It was very useful, very necessary, and we managed to absorb it successfully, so to speak. And then we broke out of that range. By the way, 2,700 is also a very important zone which we've just reached. I wrote on Telegram that we shouldn't expect a quick breakout right away. We need to consolidate here for a while. Great. We consolidated basically right here. There was this resistance, which we broke through and exited quite impulsively as well. By the way, on some days, Ether even had higher futures trading volume than Bitcoin. So it even surpassed Bitcoin in open interest on the futures, which is definitely encouraging. And right now, there are still a lot of bullish news and ideas about Ether. We'll talk more about that later as well. I'd like to see some kind of accumulation here for Ether, some sort of buildup, and maybe with some kind of shakeout here as well. And after that, nothing is stopping us from moving into the 3,200 to 3,700 zone, from which we'll already be looking toward 4,000. I think we'll reach 4,000 much sooner than most people expect. And it's a bit encouraging how much liquidity is currently flowing into Ether. The way funds are now actively shifting toward Ether, even taking some profits from Bitcoin, well, that shows that things are more than good for Ether right now. In terms of cycles, everything is more or less the same. So globally, nothing has changed. Bitcoin is repeating, so to speak, all its cycles after the halving. That's why, if I were you, I would be active in the market right now and hold on to my crypto as tightly as possible. Next comes a correction. Such corrections are given so that people who are sitting on the sidelines can buy in, enter the market, and so that those who are afraid, those who already fear losing their profit can exit. Basically, it's just to shake out the extra passengers. And if you wanted to pick up some altcoins, if you were considering them for yourself, now is the perfect time to buy something. What should you buy? Well, I wouldn't say this is my entire wish list, but these are the assets I hold, each in different proportions. Obviously, the main part of my portfolio is in Ethereum. The largest percentage is in ETH. I used to have Bitcoin, but unfortunately, I've already sold it. I realized that was a mistake, but I sold it at a good price, around 100,000, so I don't think it was foolish. If we look at Solana, by the way, Solana currently looks weaker than Ethereum. It's still stuck in the same range it's been in since the 25th of February. For now, we're in the middle of the range, and nothing interesting is happening. I was buying Solana on the pullbacks at around $100, $130 now, at 100, 130. Yeah, in this range, well, up to $150, you could basically accumulate it. Now, when it goes a bit lower, you can set some limit orders and try to pick it up the same way. That's the current situation with Solana. Now, let's also take a look at Ethereum and Bitcoin. By the way, we have a pretty good picture here. 4 hours, let's switch to the daily chart. On the daily, we can see there's a slight reaction in Ethereum. Ethereum is holding up, and here we have a bit of a squeeze. If we look at it just locally, there's just a ton of potential in Ethereum. Take a look for a second. It just bounced, right? Showed a tiny move here, and already Ethereum is reacting around the 3,000 mark. It's trying to consolidate. By the way, I actually think it has consolidated. Even if this current correction takes us down to 2,800, we'll just be liquidating some of the big leveraged longs. That's absolutely within the normal range. I believe we're consolidating and moving into a new, or rather an old range again, right here into this range. Okay, let's move on. There's some news like this, and it's already pretty big. Standard Chartered is becoming the first global bank to offer institutional investors trading in Bitcoin and Ethereum. That's insanely cool. And news like this, well, this kind of news was just a dream before. For banks to officially offer institutions and investors the ability to trade Bitcoin and Ethereum, back in 2017, this would have been pure science fiction. Okay. Now, this kind of news has come out, by the way, during corrections. There are always some alarming, scary news stories that seem designed just to shake people out. A dormant Bitcoin whale sold 2.34 billion worth of Bitcoins through Galaxy Digital after 14 years. This is the first sale in history from an address associated with an OG from 2011. In other words, these are such early Bitcoin users. Is this scary? Well, $2.34 billion in Bitcoin isn't scary for the market, considering the current open interest in buying and how much is flowing into ETFs. And we'll talk about that as well in a moment. By the way, today, some other interesting data is coming out. This is the CPI. Let me explain right away what that is. Simply put, it shows how inflation is doing right now, right? And by the way, we just got the latest report, 2.4 with a forecast of 2.5. Actually, I wanted to say it would be 2.4. So the report has already come out, and the previous figure was 2.3. So according to the forecast, things were supposed to be not so great. And as a result, we're already seeing a bit of a rebound here, right? So at least we have a pause now, but this is on the daily chart. Let's take another look. Let's switch to the 4-hour chart, and we can already see a pause. So we've clearly consolidated, and in this case, some kind of support is already forming. Although I admit that we might still see a small dip here to trigger some additional stop losses. And for those who don't know, CPI stands for Consumer Price Index, where everything is as straightforward as possible. This is the inflation rate in the US, from which basically everything else follows the Fed's actions, rate cuts. That's why the stock market is rising and so on. We are seeing a downward trend. It's all very clear. If everything is very simple right now, let me explain it to you. The Federal Reserve System uses the CPI to understand the level of inflation. This directly affects interest rates, monetary policy, asset prices, stocks, bonds, crypto, salaries, and so on. We also have unemployment, which we probably discuss separately in another episode. Here, this includes food, beverages, housing, medical services, energy, gasoline, electricity, clothing, transportation, and so on. So if the numbers come in above expectations, the market might drop due to expectations of a rate hike. Right now, there is a trend toward lowering rates, which is why, in general, this report turned out to be pretty good. Low CPI, inflation is under control, the Fed can ease its policy, and we see that there is currently a downward trend, so this is good for the market. But naturally, the market is volatile around such events, which is why there are corrections and various news and situations are thrown in during these times. So you get the idea, right? On ultrasound, we can take a look at how is Ethereum doing right now. And if we look at the last 30 days, 81,000 ETH have been burned, while 968,000 ETH have been generated through staking. That's if we look at the current statistics, yes. So that's how things are right now. You can also look at how it was after the update, when the burn mechanism was launched, when the merge happened. And globally, Ethereum is now inflationary. But remember the moment when the pools opened in Plasma, how quickly the collection happened, when people were willing to pay high gas fees just to have their transaction prioritized. Simply put, burning more ETH so that your transaction goes through faster. And now imagine how open interest is growing, how much transaction activity is increasing, means claims, drops, and so on. So overall, swaps and ETH itself could become highly deflationary in just 1 or 2 months. And naturally, this will be reflected in the price. I've said for a long time that this is a long-term indicator, and when the market is in a stage of stagnation, correction, or a bear phase, when no one is really interested in making transactions, of course, ETH will be inflationary. And now I wouldn't say the situation has changed dramatically, but if we click here on the flame icon and take a look, we can see the overall picture. We've burned 1.168k ETH, that is 1,168 ETH. And here we've had 744k ETH produced. So that's the current situation with Ethereum. Yes, it's experiencing inflation, but you'll see how this situation can change quite significantly. For example, when the market was growing in December and January of 2024, things were generally going well for the market. And remember March, when there was that mini altcoin season, here we actually saw a decrease in the amount of Ethereum. In other words, Ethereum was decreasing, and that was great. Inflation dropped significantly. And after that, when the market became inactive, that's when inflation started to rise. But it's still not a huge amount. 0.801%. That's even less than 1%. So it's not like, wow, that's a lot. Okay. Over $556 million flowed into spot Bitcoin and Ethereum. In other words, a full RDA went into them. And here we can see which tickers were involved and how it happened. So everything is great here. Almost every week, there are new records for inflows into ETFs. BI Digital is investing over 67 million more into Ethereum. Many funds and many companies are now focusing on Ethereum because Ethereum has an upcoming upgrade. It currently has great growth potential. And for some reason, this is now becoming obvious to everyone. Although I've been rooting for Ethereum all along, starting from this bear market, whether it was at 1,000, 1.5 to 2.5, or even 3.5, I was buying it, and I don't think it was a mistake because we accumulate DCA according to our own financial capabilities as well. Basically, what's happening now, or rather, what will happen is that for some reason it will become obvious to everyone in hindsight that they should have been accumulating Ethereum, and everyone will suddenly become Ethereum millionaires, at least in words. But we all understand this perfectly well, don't we? Anyway, you can read all about it here. An insanely big piece of news. The company BI Digital, which is listed on Nasdaq, Gaish has announced a plan for a direct offering of 22 million common shares, expecting proceeds of about 67.3 million. According to the official statement, all the funds raised will be used to purchase Ethereum. I don't think this will be their last purchase. And as of the 7th of July, the company owned about 100,000 ETH, which was valued at around $300 million at the time of writing. By the way, that's a very, very substantial amount of Ethereum they have. Next, SharpLink raised 10,000 ETH from the Ethereum Foundation, by the way. That's quite a noteworthy piece of news that not many people are talking about. All of this happened on the 11th of July, which is my birthday. Wow, that's really cool. They spent 25.7 million on acquiring Ethereum. The company bought 10,000. Everything is going great. They see potential in Ethereum. You could say they didn't buy at the best price because it could have been cheaper. But these companies and funds aren't looking at Ethereum for no reason. They understand that even a 1.5 or 2 times return is significant for them. Those are real gains. And Ethereum has the potential to reach up to $10,000, hypothetically. Just calculate how profitable and advantageous this is for them in terms of returns on such capital. That's why I think they made the right move, and they deserve a lot of credit. Next, regarding Ethereum, the Ethereum Foundation announced the launch of L1ZK EVM. Simply put, if, roughly speaking, layer 2 solutions are no longer needed, now the meta has changed, and all the layer 2s that have been launched, if they don't adapt to Ethereum's current update, I don't see the point of them. Basically, they just dilute Ethereum's own chain. And just take a look at this update. You can also go and read about it yourself. The point is that they will become faster. Yes, they'll be able to process more transactions, and there will be less latency. For example, the block verification delay will be no more than 10 seconds with security at 100 bits initially and 128 bits later on. The proof size will be at least 300 kilobytes. And this shows that, well, Ethereum is evolving, and all this time the team has been working on something. The fact that the Ethereum Foundation have been selling on the market, locking in profits from Ether, and actually there were even sales recently at 3,000. Vitalik has mentioned this more than once already. This is done to support the team, to pay salaries, and to fund staff expansion. Well, we understand that Vitalik has a lot of Ether and he wants to keep developing in some way. Yes, he simply needs to eat after all. And basically, it's normal that they selling an acetone that has brought him a huge number of multiples. So this is absolutely within the norm, especially since he's not dumping it like to zero or anything. These are, after all, strategic sales, you could say. Spot A, that's how it was. Spot Ethereum on Bitcoin, Ethereum. Spot ETFs for Bitcoin and Ethereum showed positive dynamics on the 9th of July. Ethereum I158, basically Ethereum, these are all ETF tickers. Just look at the inflows happening here. And if we even go to Foresight, let's look here on the 11th of July, take a look. And here we have Bitcoin. Let's start with Ethereum first. For Ethereum, there are 259 million, 204, 383. Just look, if we take, say, over a week, more than 1 billion officially flowed into ETFs. These are clients of companies, funds, yes. So they are investing money in Ethereum. They see potential in it. Retail investors there are clearly smarter than ours. Yes, American retail, because they always look further ahead. Everything always happens much earlier and faster for them. And the same funds, yes, and the same investors, they understand something, they see something, and they consider these technologies as promising. With Bitcoin, we can see that the inflows here are, wow, really huge. Just look at these numbers, over 1 billion in a single day. It's not like this happens every day, but for 2 days in a row, the 10th and the 11th, we saw significant growth because of this. And then after that, it's something like 300 million. Yes, just that. So that's roughly the picture, in my opinion. So why am I getting steroid ads here? What is this even about? I don't get it. Are the benches trying to get me to bulk up again or what? Oh, those rascals. Anyway, and here there are massive inflows happening. Naturally, these are inflows from BlackRock, inflows from Fidelity. And then ARK is also adding in as well. But as usual, BlackRock is taking the lead. They're actually the ones providing the main volume here. And let's take a look at another interesting picture regarding the amount of Ethereum on exchanges. We can see that the price is rising, the price is moving up, that's clear. But the amount is starting to drop. If we look at, say, the past month, we see that people are buying Ethereum and withdrawing it from centralized exchanges. Why is this happening? Because accumulation is taking place and people are viewing Ethereum as an asset to hold right now to increase their holdings in short. There's an accumulation phase going on, after which we'll see growth. Another interesting point, right now, 29% of the entire Ethereum supply, just think about it, 30% of Ethereum is in staking. What does this tell us? It shows that people believe in growth, they want to increase their holdings, and there is also institutional Ethereum in there. Is this cool? Answer that question for yourself. And what else is cool? The strategic reserve, the strategic reserve of the project has exceeded $4 billion and more than 50 projects have added it to their holdings. In my opinion, that's really bullish. Now, please write your own arguments as well if you think that all of this is, I don't know, just herding people to the slaughter in terms of the market, or that it's just a dead cat bounce and there will be a correction. If that's what you think, write it in the comments. And I recommend you open a short position, preferably with high leverage and a good margin, and try to short this market because we need that fuel. We need it so that the market can grow and we can gradually exit at our targets. Of course, I'm joking. That's sarcasm. But if you have a bearish opinion, please give a well-structured response. I'd be interested to discuss it with you and see your arguments. That is definitely needed as well. It's not like I'm not saying that I'm endlessly rooting only for growth. I'm rooting for it up to a certain point. And when that time comes, I'll change my stance and maybe that'll surprise some people. Friends, the next video will be out tomorrow. If you found this helpful, this new format is quite challenging and exciting for me. Please support me with a like. Let me know in the comments what you think and subscribe to the Telegram channel. Once again, give it a like, I'll repeat. Wishing everyone profits and goodbye for now.